everyone, and welcome back to AmourologyEd, where we do sex and alternative lifestyle education. So this is kind of a special video, I feel like, for me, because, hey, hello, I'm human, and sometimes I make mistakes. So if you watched my video on Two-Spirit, you know, and my other videos afterwards, you know that I needed a corrections video for it. So I'm here with Amie, and Amie is here to give us kind of the lowdown on what I got wrong. So can you tell us about yourself?
Hi, I'm Amie, and my father is a 5 tribes Cherokee member, and I've been raised with siblings that belong to other tribes and other parental figures of other tribes, and I've lived on a few reservations in my time. So to say the least, I'm a little bit on the native side.
All right, yeah. So tell us what Two-Spirit is. This is kind of a loaded question, I know, but
It's a very loaded question. So Two-Spirit is really a word that kind of makes a bridge between the native thought process and the white colonialist approach to gender and sex is what I would call it.
okay. Yeah, what does that mean?
Well, that's not simple.
Right.
So for all intensive purposes, it means LGBTQI and Native. But what that means within Native speak is a little bit different because each tribe has its own belief systems, its own culture, and its own moralistic view on what is what. So it's not so simple to define what it is as more than a word that we use so that white people understand what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And then we figure it out on our own depending on our affiliations.
Yeah, so that's so interesting. When we were talking earlier, you were talking about how, this was a word that was created so that white people feel more comfortable with the idea and can put it in their cute little boxes that they always do, right?
Yeah, I feel oftentimes that white people, colonial belief systems are very square. Mm-hmm. They're very rigid, and that a lot of Native beliefs, while some may be similar, are more circular and a lot harder to squish into that square box. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes things are described in a way so that there's that being able to come together and have some understanding. But I think really it's also a word that speaks to taking power back, the power to be ourselves, to be who we are, and to follow our own belief system. Because for the last, 300-400 years, we've been being forced into becoming more and more colonial. I'm going to say colonial because it's a little nicer than white, but it's really hard when you've been forced into doing everything in that way when that's not what the belief of your ancestors are. It's not the belief that you're raised with, and it was kind of something that, let's see, how do I put this? Things in the Native world, they weren't against LGBTQI to begin with. And it became a really bad thing at the time of boarding schools as the tribes started to lose their culture because of children being taken away and re-educated. And now tribes are deciding that they're not going to allow that to happen anymore, and we're taking back the power of our words and the power to be who we are. So that word is really more of a sign of this is who we are, and you don't get the power to define us as LGBTQI because our people who are those things are not outcasts. Yeah. And LGBTQI are often treated as outcasts.
Yeah.
And it's a powerful thing to be able to say we are who we are and these are our people and we will treat them our way. And that we want them separate from your way, not because LGBTQI are bad, but because we refuse to take part in the treatment of our people as social outcasts.
Mm-hmm.
Rather, they are magical people that have their own unique powers and wonderful things about them, and they're a huge part of the community.
Yeah.
And oftentimes were huge parts of the community.
Yeah. I like the analogy that you gave me earlier, something along the lines of two-spirit people are similar to, like, the grass is green. They just are.
Yeah, that's true. They are. They're not... It isn't something where people... Okay, let's see. In colonial culture...
Buckle up, everyone.
In colonial culture, coming out of the closet is like this big, huge thing. Your family might not love you. Your family might not be able to be around you. You might not be able to be around your friends. It has such a huge effect. I mean, we're in 2020 and we're still debating on whether LGBTQI are allowed to have homes to live in and jobs to work, let alone if they are rightfully allowed to be humans in the full capacity. And that is a grating concept to most natives, naturally. Obviously, there are natives that aren't okay with it, but the reality is that most tribes always had a place for them.
Yeah.
And they were who they are, not somebody who needed to change, not somebody who needed to come out. It was just...
Yeah, or even needed acknowledgement that they're different in some way, right? Yeah.
You are what you are.
Yeah.
Is there a difference? Of course there is. We are all different. But it's not a difference that is life-altering. It's just... It doesn't need to be defined that much.
Yeah, interesting.
Depending on the tribe, like... definitions vary a lot. Sometimes there were only 2 words, and that I think is probably more often true, that there's only 2 words that are used for somebody who is two-spirited. Some have 3 words, some have 5 words, some have 20 words, but oftentimes it just has to do with whether they are female aligning or male aligning, and that's all anybody cares about. That's not a big deal. So in the Cherokee belief system, there's 5. There's 2 different types of male, female, depending on how male or how female you are. And then there's the one in between that would be intersex person or an androgynous person. It could be used for either. And that's applied across the board to anybody, not just to people that are two-spirited, but anybody. You're either a female, a male, a in-between, or going the other side on the other scale, because it's all a scale.
Yeah.
And it just kind of pre-warns people what to expect, I guess,
Sure.
But it wasn't a big deal.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a big part of Native culture that really holds the magic that is what somebody who stands out and stands apart is. Oftentimes they're medicine people or people who do special tasks in the community. They may be people that, because they like both male and female things, can do more tasks well, and therefore they're important to the community that way. But I think that the main thing to come away with is that it didn't really matter all that much.
It's just the person that they are. It's just,
it is.
Yeah.
If you're a girl and you want to go hunt, well, you go hunt.
True. Yeah.
Congratulations. If you're a guy and you want to basket weave, great.
Yeah.
It wasn't like it is here. Oftentimes, well, I don't even know of a time when there wasn't. As far as I know, I'm sure there's someone out there that knows more about this. There aren't a lot of times when they weren't allowed to marry who they wanted. It just, they were considered to be who they presented themselves as.
Yeah, that's so
which
interesting.
is beautiful.
Yeah.
It's
So talk to me, you mentioned the idea of like intersex. Talk to me about how gender and intersex and sexuality all kind of play into it a little bit more.
Well, I think it kind of covers all of those things. So it's simple but convoluted at the same time.
Sure.
I guess going from a colonialistic belief system where we have to have a tag for everything. So if you're intersex and you're female, then we would use the female word for you.
Right.
If you're trans and you're male, then you're a male. And there may be a word that says that you were born one way and feel this way, but there might not be.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on the tribe.
Right. And in the long run, it just doesn't even matter.
Yeah. So if you're a female that likes sex with females, there's...
Great.
Yeah. There's a word for it, possibly.
Uh-huh.
You know, each tribe is different, but it encompasses all of those things, not just one of those things. And it's a huge word. I mean, it's really covering the spectrum of the LGBTQI. Mm-hmm. But within each tribe, that's going to be different. Mm-hmm. That's the big thing there.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that, I mean, so far, I feel like my biggest takeaway is this idea that Two-Spirit was a concept created for white people. Yes. Which is really fascinating to me.
I just want you to know the Indian tacos were also created for white people.
It's true. I knew that.
Not that we mind them, but just so you know.
Thank you. So talk about how this affects your daily life and your family structure.
So in my family, well, it has affected my life in different ways during different times of my life. Mm-hmm. I have 2 children who are intersexed, and I would probably be considered intersex myself, but I'm definitely bisexual. Mm-hmm. So there's some effect there. The effect that I see, like the difference between the colonial outview on this and the native outview on this, like I was telling you the story of my daughter who is intersex. And nobody knew that she was intersex that was in a group on the reservation, and she ran up on a car and pulled her skirt up and pulled her penis out and peed. And everybody went, huh? Was he true? And they said yes, and they went back to work, and it was said and done.
Yeah.
So it was just a curiosity. It wasn't a big deal. It didn't affect how they treated her. They still treat her very much like a girl. Not one of those people would ever call her a boy or say that she needed surgery to make her different or better. Mm-hmm. Her place is who she is, and
that just wasn't questioned. Yeah.
Yeah. But when I come out here and I'm in the colonial world, that's a whole different ballgame. I constantly am questioned by doctors, and I've been questioned about people in every aspect of my life when it comes up, when we'll have surgery and what we think that looks like. Is it right to allow her to be a girl? You know, everything from what is her dating life going to be like, how's she going to have sex? I don't know, people. I don't know how she's going to have sex. I don't care. She's my 6-year-old. You know,
you'll figure it out. Yeah.
It's just not my choice. And I think that's a big thing that maybe we didn't talk about, but I'm realizing that
we should. Yeah.
We should talk about.
Let's do it.
Yes. There's my daughter's life is her life. My life is my life, and your life is your life. And in colonialism, oftentimes it is a matter of society telling you how your life is supposed to be.
Yeah.
And how it's supposed to look and be run, and what the norm is. And that's not the same when I'm on the reservation. There, my life is my life, and what I choose to do with it, as long as I'm not hurting somebody else with it, is fine. Mm-hmm. You either like me or you don't, but it'll be based on who I am.
Yeah.
Not on what your expectations of me are going to be. And that's a really hard thing to conceptualize, being in town and off of the res, because that's just not the way it is. I mean, we totally tell women and men how they have to act and respond and do all day long, and I'm guilty of it as much as anybody, because you kind of get into that mode. But you know, living in Idaho, growing up in Idaho, one of the laws there is that you have to wear a certain amount of underclothes of the sex that you were given on your birth certificate. I know people who have been arrested for not wearing enough underclothes on their body of the sex that they were born with.
Wow.
Yeah, that's why natives feel like they need to separate this out and say we're not part of that game.
Yeah. No wonder.
We don't want to do that. That's not okay.
Yeah.
We're done with that now, and we're going to move on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, their worry beforehand a lot of times was more about what was going to happen off-res or with the on-res people that monitored them than it was about the person, because that didn't matter as much. What is.
Yeah. I love that. I feel like we could learn a lot from that.
I think it's a lot more relaxed. The
Yeah.
rules are a lot easier sometimes on the res and talking about things. Like, it's just nonchalant.
Tend to overcomplicate things a lot, for sure.
I think so, just a little.
So Vic, tell me about some challenges that people in the tribes could face coming outward into colonialism or being who they are in this world that we live in.
I mean, in this world that we live in is a really huge place. So again, I cannot say enough that there are hundreds of tribes, and each tribe is going to be different.
Yeah.
And some may not agree that they want to step away from colonialism. And if so, then they're going to be facing the same thing that everybody out here is.
Yeah.
So that's something that's really important to look at, because you can't just say all natives. Like, it's just so hard to generalize with natives. I think that stepping out of their culture is really hard because it's just a different place. This is not the same life here as it is there. It's just not. I try to explain this often to people when I try to explain concepts that I think are so simple, and then I'm faced with the fact that I see it in a really weird way compared to other people.
Yeah.
It is frustrating constantly, totally frustrating.
So really it depends on whether whether you're living in a colonial world or living in a...
And how colonial?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I mean, are you walking out of the tribe into LA, or are you walking from a tribe into Utah? Because those are two very vastly different things. And LA looks a lot nicer in their view of people and what people's rights are. I say that laughingly because that's a lot of people. And I don't really like LA, but ew. No, it's just when somebody has been raised on the tribe and hasn't walked off of the tribe, this is a very alien place to be. It's really alien. There's just not an encompassing belonging that happens here.
Yeah.
So when you're there, you belong to your family, your clan, and your tribe. And those people are there. And even if you don't know them, it doesn't matter.
They're still, yeah.
You still know them.
Yeah.
You know, there's a different way of speaking. Pronouns are not a big thing. We were talking about that earlier. And it's like, it really just isn't a big thing to use pronouns, which is really foreign.
Yeah. So asking you what your pronouns are when we very first met is a strange concept and kind of not
uncomfortable.
useful.
I'm like, it's such a weird thing that people feel like they need their pronouns, and I understand that you guys do because they get used a lot, and we use pronouns to a point. But I don't, when I'm talking to somebody like on my brother's family, we talk a lot, or if I'm talking to somebody outside of my like really close friends that I grew up with that's on the reservation, I'm not talking about he's or she's, it's aunties and uncles and cuz. And when I talked, so even addressing people, and there's a lot less respect out here. Like,
Sure.
you get your head slapped with a shoe for talking to people like...
Well, I feel like there's more of like a solidarity in referring to people as these titles and family, and like, I don't know, it just feels more like you're a structure, you're a unit.
But you are.
Right.
Because you live or die on your clan and your tribe.
Yeah.
So you're, you know, it's so totally different.
Yeah, interesting.
I think that the LGBTQI is very close knit in a lot of ways and kind of acts similar to a tribal situation.
I can see that. Mm-hmm.
And similar to a tribal situation, nobody there is like saying you can't be who you want to be.
Yeah, interesting.
But for general outside of that, that's...
Yeah. So in my last video, I briefly touched on one of the sources that I found claimed that like polyamory could be included in this kind of umbrella term of two-spirit.
Yeah.
So correct that for me.
No, people. So here's the deal. A lot of times what we find is that anthropologists, thank you, one of those, that they go into a culture and they write a paper on a culture and they base it on their own insights coming from a different culture, which makes absolutely no sense. Now, polyamory is definitely a part of Native cultures. Each tribe, again, is going to be different, but it is not at all close to the way colonialism treats marriage. However, I would not say that two spirits has anything to do with being polyamorous at all. Like, that's not even in there. This is all about sexuality and gender and those things. However, I think there's a lot of really interesting belief systems, and that it's pretty common, even to this day, it's very common to practice polyamory within Native cultures. You know, it's just...
Yeah, it's just not under that umbrella term.
Yeah, that's not considered like even anything that's special. So it's like...
Yeah.
I think that more Natives have a hard time being in a monogamous relationship and being married. Like, that's weird.
Interesting.
There are, like, I know people who are, but it doesn't often do really well, and it takes a lot of work in order to be that on a reservation.
Sure.
There's a lot of sayings about that.
So in this world where we have papers that are being written on this type of stuff that are tinged with this colonial perspective because white people feel the need to write papers on things, what resources would you say somebody should go to in order to learn more about this?
Well, I did give you that video that I think is like one of the best videos that I've seen. But I think that if you want to find out, you're going to have to meet some Native Americans.
Yeah.
Or make sure that the papers you're reading are written by Native Americans, because they're going to understand this stuff a lot better than white people. I'm just going to put it out there.
For me, I can say, like, if I'm a white person reading with my own bias, reading a paper that was written by a white person about this other thing, we're getting like double biases here. So
it's okay, and it can be confusing, to be fair. I mean, I understand where you were coming from, and I understand what the paper was written about, but it wasn't really about two-spirited people that assumption was made on. So
which is great, which is cool.
You know, it was about somebody who's poly and two-spirited. That's allowed. Yeah. So.
Well, and I'll link to the video that you're referring to in the show notes if you're really interested. It is really, I highly recommend it. Can you tell us, we were talking in the hall out there about ways to go about meeting Native people, because sometimes it can be really difficult when you reach out, people don't respond.
It can be really hard. I think I was telling you that you could just go to a funeral. Normally, if you just introduce yourself and sit down and buy the food, they will talk to you. But honestly, sometimes it's hard, and sometimes you need to go looking and going to the actual reservation and trying to find people that are there to talk about it would probably be the best way.
Awesome. I love that.
Yeah. And each reservation is going to be different. It's going to be kind of hard, so.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if people have more questions about this, they can obviously funnel questions through me, and I will get them to appropriate sources because I'm not an appropriate source for this. But can they reach out to you if they have any questions? And where can they reach out to you at?
Oh, God. You need me to have a place?
I mean, I could just funnel questions if you're not comfortable giving out a place.
Put me on the spot. Can they find me on Facebook?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll just link to your Facebook.
That would be great.
Excellent. Make sure you maybe send a message as to why you're friend requesting this person or what's going on
send me
with
a message through Facebook. I'm not going to add y'all as friends.
Love it.
So.
Okay. Yeah. Anything that we didn't cover that you feel like is important to know?
It's endlessly fascinating for me, so I don't know. That's going to be up to you.
Okay. Well, I don't know either. All right. Well, okay. Well,
oh, I know.
Okay.
Don't call yourself two-spirited just because you're LGBTQI. You're not unless you're Native American, and it's really rude. Mm-hmm. So, you can talk about it, you could be interested in it, but no, Jeff, you may not be.
Ooh, okay. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for meeting with me. I really, really appreciate it. And again, if you see anything that you feel like is not correct on my videos, please reach out because I would like to get the correct information out of there.
And I really appreciate you being open and accommodating and talking. And
yeah, absolutely.
I really appreciate that.
Yeah. As always, you can find me at AmourologyEd.net. You can find me at AmourologyEd on all social media. You can join my Facebook group if you're interested in having more conversations outside of this realm. You can like and subscribe and tell a friend to get this information out there. You can also join my Patreon at AmourologyEd, and there's lots more information about the Native culture and about alternative lifestyle that I think is pertinent to alternative lifestyles that we've kind of talked about. So you can probably look for some more videos later regarding more stuff. But
I'd be interested in discussing that.
Yeah, excellent. So anyway, thank you. Bye. The song I have chosen